if you read Csikszentmihalyi's work, the book and his other research, that's not the case.
Just those moments where the world goes quiet.
The comments suggest that maybe it's AI.
But would I recommend the book?
So, here we are again. Welcome to Equip. You had a weird lip quiver then. Looked like you were about to burst out laughing. We're here for our first ever book review.
I'm looking forward to this.
And I have a book in my hand which we have reviewed. So there's me.
Which book have you reviewed?
It's
I've done this one.
Optimal. No, that's not your book.
I'm joking.
So we've got Optimal, our first book review with Daniel Goleman and Cary Cherniss, How to Sustain Excellence Every Day. We've all been through this. You've been through this, and it's not just me and you, because Harry is at the back over there, going beyond production this time, but is also giving some input from the rest of our book review club, I believe. Harry, is that right?
That's right, I'm here.
Excellent. So the plan is that we'll have our own thoughts. I've got my thoughts on this. I don't usually dog ear books, and I don't usually highlight in books, but for this one I kind of have done quite a lot of dog earing and highlighting.
So you've got dog ears writing and
dog ears writing
4x3 cards
and some index cards.
Yeah, I started dog earing, but went to these little things that you're supposed to use because the dog earing ruins your book, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah. So we just wanted to have a bit of a chat then to find out what we think, because this is a good book, because it's a good book for us to start with the book review, because it's very close to our hearts. It's an area we know and love. We are EmotionIntell, Emotional Intelligence Academy, and this is a book predominantly around emotional intelligence. So I'm interested to hear what the rest of our EIA family have to think about it, and may as well just jump in. So what are your kind of, your general, straight in, what do you think as a book?
You mean start with a summary?
Yeah.
I'm conflicted. So on one side, for the layperson seeing this on the shelf in the airport, who's interested in emotional intelligence, I think this distills a lot of the work of what, particularly Daniel Goleman, because he doesn't refer much to, he doesn't refer to Mesquite or Baron. He doesn't refer to those at all. He keeps it very, very firm on his own stuff. So if you're interested in Goleman's history and Cherniss, because they've worked together on this, then it pulls it together in quite a readable little book. So it's readable. It's got the academic references, and but it's not a holiday read, but it's not far off. So that's on one side. On the other side, I was reading through, and I was Optimal. This is new. 2025 was the Penguin publication. I think the copyright, the first script went into 2023, so it's only a couple of years old, some of the text. But this publication in Penguin is this year. I was a little bit underwhelmed, I have to say, because it felt like old wine in new bottles. No, it's vintage wine, it's good stuff. But it's being represented, and for those who have read his other stuff, I didn't find much new. So that was my initial reaction.
I think I would concur with that, because it's. I agree that if you don't know, particularly if you haven't read his, because there's a lot of books out there on emotional intelligence, and if you haven't read the previous works of Daniel Goleman and others and looked at his models, then it is a good introduction, because it does have quite a work focus in there as well. The examples in there, you've got some anecdotal stuff around some of the corporate organisational application of emotional intelligence, and that's obviously the one of the things that we're really passionate about, is trying to embed it within organisations. So having those examples are useful. But we do have down here obviously a stack of, we've got destructive emotions, social intelligence, new leaders, emotional intelligence, and then there's working with emotional intelligence as another book. If you've already gone through some of that material, I agree that this will be a reread, essentially. But it is good if you've not read some of those. This is an interesting summary. The other side for me is the link to flow, which I will go into, because there's a lot of talk around the concept of flow and how this isn't flow. So for those people that aren't aware, flow is a psychological concept, and Mihai Csikszentmihalyi is the kind of the person that's most talked about when we talk about flow. And Flow, the book, is around the psychology of optimal experience. So already when I pick this book up and it starts with that concept of flow, I'm trying to work out, well, where is the difference between what we're saying is optimal experience in the terms of emotional intelligence, and how does it link to the optimal experience of flow? So that was the side that I was interested to see where it went with this. So we'll dive into both of these areas in a moment, I'm sure.
And I mean, supporting that, I'm a little bit of a purist when it comes to models, and the reference is, this is a model, so the optimal model. And so as soon as you see model, I'm looking for a picture. I'm looking for a definition. I'm looking for what goes underneath it. And what I got is 5 bullet points on what the flow research names these specific elements. Great. Now we're going to differentiate what the optimal model is compared to the flow model before we get to emotional intelligence. So there's 2 stools, flow, emotional intelligence, and I'm looking for this new model in the middle. But the construct isn't really defined. No. It's where flow, as we all know, is being in the moment. When you might be fishing, you might be playing a golf shot, you might be a basketball player you might be a penalty taker. Just those moments where the world goes quiet and everything feels right. And the loose definition, if stitching things together, is optimal is like that, but it lasts all day. And if you've had a good day, you've been optimal.
Yeah. So I think there's, so I think the flow experience, there's been a lot of writing on flow, and the one thing that it comes back to several times in this is that flow is rare, it's intense, it's individualistic, it's not something that's easy to replicate. But if you read flow, if you read Csikszentmihalyi's work, the book and his other research, that's not the case. There's a lot of research to suggest you can get it into education, you can get it into the workplace, and it's about task design. So the difference is, here we're talking about models, it's emotional intelligence they're talking about, and it feels like it's flow being repackaged a little bit with EI and then broadening it out somehow. So it's take an interesting concept and broaden it out, add EI, and you end up with this. But I still feel it's flow, but they don't want to say it's flow. They're just broadening it out. But really, it's a book on emotional intelligence, not about flow. So it's the disjoint between the, like you said, what's the model in the middle, what's that? So that's kind of the area that I was looking at as I went through this book. Yeah,
and as near as it gets, I mean, I've read it a couple of times. Maybe I need to read it again. Maybe it's me. I've not got it yet. But I don't get this yet. But there's some subjective elements of being in an optimal state, having a really good day, which is you're more creative, you're more productive, you feel good, you're mentally sharp, positive outlook, and you give and get support in relationships. And that's the subjective experience of an optimal state. And then viewing from the outside, it looks like emotional intelligence. So that's the nearest I can get to what is it? Because I want to put my finger on it, and it was like a piece of mercury on a table. I couldn't pin it down through the book.
And I think what they're essentially saying is being emotionally intelligent is optimal.
If you are emotionally intelligent, you have more chance of having a good day.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to be reacting, you're not going to be mishandling, not regulating your emotions, and therefore your day is probably going to be more productive and maybe even more pleasant.
I do want to draw Harry in on a bit of whether he wants to do this now or not, but get some information from our group as well. But Harry, we had a brief conversation prior to recording everything this morning around. It is very, you'll feel great, you'll have a good day. It's great. Yeah, if you do this, everything's fine. Life is all love, light, and roses. Very rose-tinted glasses kind of thing. But Harry's point was around, but what about when life isn't great? Harry, did you want to carry on?
Yeah, it was a lot of the points behind it was painted as it was almost easy to get into that optimal state. That's part of the differentiation it had from flow, is getting optimal is much easier, but it never put it within the context of when shit's going south. How do you get to it in probably when you most need it? And it just never really gave any of the anecdotes in context like that, which I think would have been more helpful to people than the anecdotes they did use.
For sure. Because you've got the stress to resilience sort of chapter in there that talks about breathing and those things, but it doesn't. We know those, so we know about mindfulness, we know about emotional intelligence, but it's what is optimal as a model? So that's the thing. So what do we mean by model, and how do we get into this state of optimal performance, or is it just emotion? Is it emotional intelligence? And if it's emotional intelligence, then we've already got that in place.
And I think the way it's framed is a flow state is the gateway into optimal. So it's a useful segue if you want to move into an optimal state.
Yeah.
A state of flow. I mean, we would call that mindfulness or clear mind. How do you have a clear mind or a calm mind before you tackle a challenging day or a challenging project?
I'm not entirely sure that's how they refer to flow, though.
So
they use the
so some research on flow shades into what we see as an optimal state, but then they say rather than peak performance, not as a single event, but as points on a wider spectrum, and then they do mention it about being this kind of trying to engineer an optimal state more effectively rather than being in an optimal state and then having this byproduct that might be flow that appears at that point. One of my issues is, though, the reason that research around flow has been around since the 1970s and is still ongoing today is because it is a psychological construct. It is something you can engineer as long as you understand. And it's got that, it feels great to be in flow, and it's a balance of challenge versus skill and time warping and less self-consciousness and all that kind of stuff. If you plan, so the writings from Csikszentmihalyi and others is if you understand in an organisation, us or whatever organisation, these are the goals we're trying to achieve. How do we set up the task? How does an individual set up the tasks to understand where they fit within that, to give them the greatest amount of chance of getting into flow? That's about how we set goals, how we plan the tasks, understanding what we're trying to achieve, and getting that feedback, which is important for flow, that that constant feedback thing, to increase that flow where you just get into it. Like, with us when we're working on a project, it's like, Cliff, this is your task. When you understand, okay, I know why we're doing this, I get my part in this, and you start, okay, I'm working my way through this goal, I've got defined milestones, and you just riffing, you're there, it might be spreadsheet analysis, it might be doing desk research or something.
Analysis.
But you never know. But it might be doing desk research or something. But when you're diving in and you're going, oh, that's good, and you're in flow and time, and you've spent 3 hours, and you're wow, that time because you're having fun. You've got that flow state, and I think to say it's fleeting and rare, and it's not something that's not true. If you understand how to manage yourself or your teams or the organisation, right, where you can encourage more flow, and that's what the research is suggesting in education as well, to help children learn more or learn more effectively.
It's a single-minded focus. Like, you can get into flow when you're writing a thesis or an assignment, and you can get turned on and out, and time just disappears. Yeah. And you can spend like 4 hours researching a project you're really interested in. Yeah. And if the interest is there, flow automatically seems to come. That was part of the comments we've had from our alumni, because we put this book club out, and book sales must have gone up because
just from our EIA
on our forums we've got people who have bought this, read it, and sent us their views in, and there's some really interesting stuff around what we're probably saying in terms of trying to put the finger on what the state is. But we had one comment that, hang on a minute, because of the way this is produced, is this AI generated? Now, you looked into that, didn't you?
I did, yeah. So one of the comments mentioned, and if we do look through the book, and this is obviously endemic at the moment, it's all over the place, there's a lot of M dashes, so we've got those double dashes around, and one of the comments that we had was there appears to be a lot of M dashes, which is seeming like it's very prevalent now in AI content, so AI slop. In particular, you see a lot of blogs out there, and you'll have these M dashes. And the comments suggest that maybe it's AI. Now, that's something that we had a look at. I was like, oh, good point. So I had a look at that, and so yes, there is M dashes in there. However, I went on a deep dive on this on the internet as well. And there's recently another academic that's been accused of their paper being AI generated, and they're like, no, I wrote this myself, but as well, look at all the M dashes. And they pulled up a paper that they wrote in 2009 and said, yeah, there's loads of M dashes in this as well. That's how academics write. So a lot of academics and professional writers use M dashes. And what's happened is AI is a large language model. It's trained on that professional and academic writing. So it's using M dashes a lot, probably more than most academics might, because it sees it as being stylistic of that kind of writing.
That's credibility.
So, and I was like, well, that's a good point. And the only reason people have never noticed it before, because they never had the awareness of M dashes before, but now we have, because everyone's saying, oh, M dashes equals AI, everyone's aware of them, now you see them. But we grabbed these books. Now these are pre Chat GPT.
90s, most of them, yeah.
So
early 2000.
M dashes all the way through it. M dashes all the way through it. M dashes all the way through it. M dashes all the way through all of these books, and these are not.
So that's a good message. You don't misjudge your text based on M dashes.
Yeah, just because you see M dashes, it is one of those things. But there are other stylistic things that also indicate that AI may be there. It's not just M dashes. So.
Yeah. What else were the themes coming through, Harry, on the feedback? I've scanned through them and we're picking up some, but is there anything you noticed?
Yeah, well, just to give the overall average rating of the group, that came in at 4.57, and the general range was between 3 and 5 stars. However, strangely, when it came down to whether they would recommend the book, that fell into the 2.5 out of 5. So it would be recommend with caution.
That's strange.
Yeah, so it's a bit of an odd one. But as you look at people's general feedback, you start to see why that might be the case. So there was a lot of people who already knew the content, so it was almost like a refresher of the content, which they thought helped them further kind of solidify their thoughts on emotional intelligence. There was comments about almost the force fit of the optimal theme into emotional intelligence, which I agree with. It really did feel like a force fit throughout. And I'm just flicking through some of their comments now. So I wish there was more development of ideas or some kind of unexpected perspective. So a lot of it, if you've read Daniel Goleman's previous work, you've read this work, to be fair. It seemed like a "see I told you so" book. So again, it's more of a supporting of emotional intelligence as a concept, as opposed to actually building on it with any new ideas. There was a healthy balance of positives and more negative comments. On the positive side, they love the fact that it obviously is based on decent research. There's a lot in the back as far as references are concerned. They liked the anecdotes, so having the anecdotes within a leadership context and applying emotional intelligence within that was really valuable. But they did find it was very repetitive. Certainly not a book to read cover to cover, and their chapters feel very similar and keep returning to the same content, which I found really frustrating. So I did a 50-50 split on this book between listening to it via Audible and then actually reading the content. and I thought I was reading the same thing twice. Like I listened to it in the car as an audiobook. And then I'm like, right, so I'm up to chapter 5. So when I get home, I'll kick off from chapter 5. I start reading. I'm like, no, I've listened to this one. I'd not. It's covering the same themes. It's just putting this slightly different angle on it. So, yeah, there was. I mean, it's a 15-chapter book. I felt like it could have probably been half of that and just been a bit more to the point. And that's come up in a lot of the feedback we've received. But yeah, so. An average of 4.5 on the did you like it scale, and an average of 2.5 on the would you recommend. Where would you two sit on those two scales?
That's subjective. Did you like the book?
Well, yeah, this is subjective. So.
Yeah, it's all subjective. Yeah, did I like the book?
Out of 5.
It was interesting to see a different. I'd probably be on the 2.5 to 3, to be fair, purely because I felt it misrepresented elements of flow or didn't go into enough detail for me on why they were significantly different. I couldn't see. Come a bit to your point. I was waiting for. So what is optimal? Like, what is your model? What is this model of optimal? If other than emotional intelligence, which we know emotional intelligence is this, we know flow is this. So is optimal just emotional intelligence, or is it something different? That is something that I missed. It's mentioned about being an optimal state, but there was no concrete model. Coming back to your point, and just before I forget, coming back to the things, what compounded that for me a little bit was when I was like, okay, I must be missing something. Let's find the definition or the characteristics of optimal state in a clearly defined way. I'll check the index. So I check the index and I find optimal performance. And do you know where it is in the book? It says C flow. So it kind of, so then if I go to flow, it's just talking about flow. So it kind of hit my point a little bit. Well, if you're going to talk about flow and credit the work of Csikszentmihalyi and others that have done work on flow and how yours meshes more appropriately. And I'm not saying didn't credit, because he does mention Csikszentmihalyi, but it could have been a bit more about flow if you're using those terms and how optimal differs more specifically, rather than just constantly saying, but it's not flow, but it's not flow, but it's not flow. It's this, and flow is more. So it just felt like I didn't really understand why they talked about flow in the first place. If you're not going to go into enough depth about how flow is actually used in the real world.
So likability, you said what, 2 point?
I'm in the middle, so I'd be 2.5 purely because I'm interested to see how it differs. But yeah, I'm probably 2.5 to 3. I'm hovering.
Right.
Yeah.
And score for recommendation to others?
If, again, similar to your point, I would agree that if you have not read any of those books and you want a bit of an introduction into emotional intelligence, in particular self-awareness, self-management side, some good stuff in empathy there that we've, again, is in the other writings, then it's good. If it's for someone like us or someone we know that's already in the field, it wouldn't be a strong recommendation. It would be a recommendation with caution for sure. So I'd definitely be at that 2.5, because if you're doing this, you've already read those books, and you're not going to get too much new that's going to benefit you. So yeah, for a new person, bump it up. It's a good book, and I agree. It looks nice, it's eye-catching. Boom, it's there. For a new person, interesting stuff, good anecdotes. I like all that.
And the writing style is fairly easy, isn't it?
On that though, so let's say someone is completely new to Daniel's work. This is obviously his latest book. Mm-hmm. Would you recommend this?
I would point them to working with emotional intelligence.
So really what you're saying is you'd point them to working with emotional intelligence, and if you've read one of Daniel's earlier work...
So this is a useful book. It's not the best book. I would say that working with emotional intelligence, something like that, is better because it's very specific to working with. It's got a lot, those anecdotes come from that work anyway. So you've got that element of, that's more specific. This, which is good and bad, this mentions flow, but not enough. So if you're going to do something, talk about it or don't.
Or go to the source.
Yeah, go to the source. Because Duke Semi-High is not mentioned that much. Like the main book, like Flow, the Flow is the psychology of optimal experience.
First chapter and a half, I think, is quite heavy.
Yeah, so it's mentioned, and it comes back to that feeling great and all that kind of stuff. How about you?
Well, I'd start on the recommendation side, and depends. I'm not going to cop out. I'm going to give some numbers, but it depends. If it's one of our students and they're interested in the history and the evolution of emotional intelligence, Daniel Goleman, as the scientific writer in the New York Times, was a significant catalyst to getting emotional intelligence on the map. And if it was a student who was really interested in this, I'd probably not recommend that book. I'd recommend these four.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. Yeah.
So I'd say, well, we'll go back to the source, which is emotional intelligence, and then the one with the Dalai Lama, the destructive emotions, and then if it's about leadership, same stuff recycled, but
working with emotional intelligence should be in there.
Working with emotion for teams as well.
Yeah.
And then you've got the social intelligence coming in. So I'd go to some of those and the others, because I think he's got about 13 books. No, he's got about 8. One's got 13, one's got 8. So between Cary and Dan, there's about 20 books they publish between them. And they're drawing on those, and this is almost like a culmination of the previous writings. And it's brought up to date to 2023. Although some of the references, and one of our reviewers sent this in, the references don't seem to have been updated much. So, 2001, 1993, 1973. So a lot of backward references haven't been brought forward, apart from, and we allowed this conflict of interest statement.
It's chapter 3, number 2.
They've recommended Emotional Intelligence Academy and the work we did with it was a survey we did with the CREO members, Consortium for Research in Emotional Intelligence in Organisations, which Daniel Goleman was a founder and co-chair, and Cary Cherniss was a co-chair. They both set back into the executive boards now, and Rob Emmeling's taken over. So that, as you know, I'm a member of that. So there's 105 more now get together. And the research in there, they drew from the thesis, and we did, about what scientists agree on. And what did they agree on? The 2x2 model, which is in there in the chapter. And then it's contaminated, I've got to say, by Goleman and Cherniss throwing in their mixed model into those 4 boxes. So they're saying scientists, if they read the whole paper, I'm sure they did, they agree on it's about self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and social interaction management. And it's those 4 quadrants. And Goleman's been using those for a while. But to say, yeah, all scientists agree, see this paper, which also said, most scientists agree, 80% plus, on ability, not mixed and traits, being part of emotional intelligence. And then 2 pages later, they stuck their old model into the boxes. It was a forced fit, in my view. And I lost interest then as a purist and as an academic, because if you're trying to be a guru of emotional intelligence, you've got to handle your bias, and I'm as guilty. But when you're writing a text, you're saying this is the latest in emotional intelligence, which on the airport shelf, it's 2005. It's got the most recent date in it. Let's read that. But guess how many times this mentions Mesquite, the ability model?
How many times, Cliff?
0. Guess how many times this mentions the E-factor, which was published in 2022, the tool that we use, which is an ability tool.
Yeah, I'm saying 0.
Bang on. Okay, we get a reference.
Yeah.
And Jack Mayer and Salove and Crusoe get mentioned only twice, just the names, on page 32 and 68. But it's with a bit of a twang towards it. And I'm thinking, that's a bit unfair. Why have you not been a little bit more holistic? So in terms of recommendation to students, I'd say if you want to look at the mixed model history of how Richard Boyatzis, he was one of the primary architects, partnered up with Daniel Goleman, took the work of Spencer and Spencer, Competence at Work. This is going back to the 70s, and then a lot of work in the 80s and 90s. And the dictionary of competencies, I was saddened that the competency dictionary in here, which 244, I went through this again, organisational awareness, positivity, developing others, teamwork and cooperation, all those leadership, twanged, contextualised competencies, which are knowledge, understanding, skills, personal attributes and traits, mixed, dog's dinner, that are in here, under the old definition of competency, which doesn't fly now, have found themselves riddled across the chapters 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9. So if you go into those, you find organisational awareness, it's not even framed differently. It was one of the original competencies. And I'm thinking, and I was jumping to judgment quite negatively.
Tut.
So I went, curiosity, well, what's going on here? Well, of course, there's a conflict of interest. Goleman is now under the umbrella of Corn Ferry. Corn Ferry bought Hay McBeer. Hay bought McBeer after Saatchi and Saatchi sold it. So those organisations have dragged the work of Boyatzis and Goleman through into a commercial organisation called Corn Ferry, who sell the ESCI tool, the ESCI tool, which Goleman sold to them and Boyatzis. And it's got, because they've got non-disclosures and commercial interest, they've got to be careful about supporting competition. I understand, I get that. And perhaps my expectations were too high in thinking if they're going to refer to emotional intelligence, they'll be a little bit more generous with the other 7 core models apart from their own, but they weren't. So in terms of that interfered with my enjoyment. So I'm afraid my score out of 5 is 0 for enjoyment. I was frustrated. I won't use a minor score, but I was frustrated reading it because it didn't respect 2025, and it didn't take us forward. And I didn't even like the way it finished on a sentence that...
Well, I mean, it just ended without anything, to be fair. So there was a very... with these cautions in mind, we realise as we look ahead to how emotional intelligence might matter, we head into the fog of the future,
The fog?
and then a disclaimer,
depressing.
and then acknowledgements. So that's kind of it felt a little bit.
It's a fog because you're perpetuating the fog.
What it needs, I think, is more of a roundup. Is what I was looking for, like a conclusion. So therefore, we've looked at flow. We've tried to separate what flow is, what optimal is or isn't. Here's emotional intelligence. If we look at all of this together, here's what we can do, some strategies moving things forward, where does the science take us, that kind of thing. But it just goes to acknowledgement. So it felt like it was a little bit incomplete for me. There wasn't enough of a wrap up for me to pull things together. And I think you mentioned about it not being, they're not mentioning everything, the lip service to some things, but I kind of didn't want that, because what I didn't think it was going to be was like a history of emotional intelligence or another emotional intelligence book, because that's already in those books down there, and those people aren't mentioning those ones either, probably. But so I wanted it to be about a new thing called the optimal state, and to bring more information, but I didn't get the key thing for me. Well, there wasn't enough in it. There wasn't just EI stuff, and even that was kind of skipped over a lot. So,
well, the reason you've not been missold, because it is about emotional intelligence. If you look at part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, part 1 is the emotional intelligence path to optimal performance. Part 2 is emotional intelligence of details. Part 3 is emotional intelligence of work. Part 4 is the future of emotional intelligence.
Yeah, but it's a book on emotional intelligence. It's not new.
And I mean, let's be fair. It is a distillation of past work. It's not new research. So if you're expecting new research, and I think my expectations were, there's going to be a new model, maybe even a new self-assessment tool, a framework that's been empirically validated, it's been tested, and I was looking for that robustness, which an academic would look for. Would a pragmatist, and the references from the chief exec of Salesforce, anyone leading a team or organisation should read Optimal. So this is no dummy. CAI of Salesforce is a huge corporation, and he's recommending it. To the leader and to the layperson who's not a geek like we are, maybe it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, there is some stuff in there around, how do you boost empathy, for example, practicing a caring mindset. So there is some strategies in there. So if you're new, it's fresh, it's a different take in an organisational context, and you're new to EmotionIntell, you want to embed that within your corporate culture or something. There is some good stuff in here that you can take away. It's not for me because it doesn't add anything new and muddies the water a little bit around the flow. That's my main thing. And then, so you're going to give it zero.
For personal enjoyment, because I was frustrated.
But how about, recommendation, but then you said you'd recommend those books as well. So.
Recommend to our students, I'd recommend Goleman. But I'd recommend his previous read and Cary Cherniss, good writers in terms of applied, because Cherniss is doing some great work at Rutters with applied emotional intelligence for leaders and leadership. So in terms of their core work, definitely they're two gurus who need to be understood. But would I recommend the book to our students? 0, but to the other works, 4.5.
Yeah. And I'd agree. I mean, Goleman, if it hadn't have been for the work that Goleman's done in the past, and Cary Cherniss, and to be fair, a lot of the CREO members, including your good self, we wouldn't be where we are today with emotional intelligence. It took that drive to get us to this point, and the passion that sits behind that consortium of people and others that are fed into it that aren't necessarily on that board. But if we go in this book,
But as researchers and practitioners, because they both put it into practice, they're not just academics. I would rate them both, 4.5 out of 5.
For sure.
They're people who need to be read and understood if you're in this field.
And I'd just like to mark one final thing actually on this, and then Harry, if there's anything else you want to add from any of the feedback. One thing that I'd like to add is that today is the first time I've ever heard you refer to yourself as an academic. So I just wanted to bring that up.
It was a verbal slip. It was a verbal slip, yeah. And because academic means of no practical use, so it was a verbal slip. Can I correct? Can we edit that later? Yeah.
We are all academics, but it's the first time I've ever heard you say you're
practitioner. Researcher practitioner. Yeah.
Cool. Harry, is there anything else that you want to add from your side and from the group work?
Just that there's a lot of agreement across the group. So the practical insights of the book scored very low. So averaged 2 to 3 on that across the group. So people not actually feeling like there was any practical stuff in there that they could actually use. The evidence and credibility of the work, that's quite high, but that's based on a lot of solid work in the future. But there's a lot of reference to there being absolutely nothing new in there. And then, of course, we've already talked about whether people would recommend it, and there's lots of 2s in there. One thing that I did find particularly enlightening was there's a section called Emotional Intelligence by Other Names, where it went into how a lot of people in the industry, maybe corporations, talk about emotional intelligence without using the term emotional intelligence. And it was just a little bit of a light bulb thing for me and for us in the industry, I felt, was, are we using the language of the people who are going to buy the products from us? And they addressed that in quite a good way in terms of, people don't necessarily search for emotional intelligence training. They'll look for relationship management or coping with leading change or influencing skills. So it's just something to keep in mind, I think, for us as an industry, as people with a passion in this, that when we're writing blogs, when we're making content, when we're delivering courses, are we speaking to the people who need it the most, who might not yet fully understand or appreciate that it all boils down from emotional intelligence.
Yeah. And it's things like well-being and psychological safety. Those are what people seem to be more interested in the challenging, turbulent times that we're currently existing within.
Yeah.
And we define that as, because we're biased, as emotional intelligence. But we've got to remember, out there, the practitioners will call it some. I mean, we bark when people call it a soft skill. I don't know, it's not a soft skill. It's a hard intelligence. But many people still call it a soft skill, and it doesn't say it's of no value.
Yeah. I think things like psychological safety, for example, that's quite business buzz. There's quite a lot of talk about psychological safety these days, and if you have an emotionally intelligent organisation, you probably have better psychological safety. You know, it's just a byproduct, isn't it? So it's.
Will it be optimal?
Will it be optimal? I'm sure it will be an optimal.
With plenty of flow.
Plenty of flow. Yeah, everyone in flow in an optimal state. Well, I think that's that's our review. Be interesting to know what everyone else thinks, as I know there are a few more people that are still in reading mode, reading this book. So we'll look forward to hearing what everyone else says. Thanks very much.
Thank you.